I ultimately pulverized my best friend's wedding and exposed her as a fraud on the local news. And it all started with her devastating terminal cancer diagnosis. It was a masterclass in vindication. But to understand how I got there, you have to understand the history we shared. Her name was Chloe. And for the longest time, she wasn't just my friend. She was my sister. We met back in grade school. And she was the one who pursued the friendship. Always wanting to sit next to me. Always wanting to talk. As we grew up, we spent countless hours at each other's houses. But by the time we were 19, my home had become our permanent meeting spot due to the terrible trouble in her family. My parents, sympathizing with her situation, informally took her in. In the back of my mind, I sometimes find myself agreeing with a comment I once read online about stories like this. I wonder if her home life was really that bad or if she was feeding me lies from the very beginning. I did everything I could to make her feel like she belonged. I'd avoid doing anything luxurious if she couldn't afford it. Like going to expensive shows. I'd even give her clothes from my own closet. She was outspoken and fun. And she made me feel like I had the most loyal friend on the entire planet. The years flew by. I graduated from college and landed a good job. Chloe's life improved, too. She had her own apartment and a steady 9 to 5. We were part of a whole group of young professionals, all trying to make our way in the world. I remember that time as bittersweet. It was the 90s. So there was no social media or texting. To stay in touch, you had to actually exchange phone numbers or emails. We bonded by sharing old stories, wondering what happened to friends we'd lost touch with. My apartment became the hub for all our get-togethers. It was spacious. And I was careful with my money. So it was still half empty. It was around this time that Chloe started to look sickly and just not herself. I was worried sick. I loved her to death. She had always been there for me. Especially after my fiancé, Adrian, broke up with me for what felt like no reason at all. Today, we'd call it ghosting. Adrian was the first man I had ever truly loved. He wasn't great at expressing his feelings. But I accepted him for who he was. Even though his cold stages left me wanting more. I was basically settling for being breadcrumbed. But he was gorgeous, successful, and protective. So when he proposed, I was on cloud 9 and chose to ignore all the negatives. We both saved a lot of money for the wedding in separate accounts. Then, out of the blue, it was over. He told me he didn't want to get married, didn't love me, and didn't want any kind of relationship. He let me keep all the money from our joint account and left a bunch of his stuff at my apartment, a workout bench, clothes, everything. It felt like he despised me so much he wanted to cut ties no matter the cost. Thankfully, we hadn't sent the invitations yet. So calling off the engagement wasn't a public ordeal. Chloe was my rock. She listened to my endless sobbing and rants about the pain. I lost so much weight I was embarrassed to even be seen on the street. She and her boyfriend, Leo, were amazing. Even letting me crash at their place when the grief hit me hard. They both cut all ties with Adrian. Then, one day, Chloe and Leo sat me down and told me that Adrian was seeing someone else. I remember the shock. My heart raced. And the news made me physically sick. I just couldn't understand how he could treat me like that. That Christmas was awful. I would just sit in my living room, staring at the wall for hours. Chloe and Leo tried to cheer me up by setting up a very 90s posh Christmas tree, all white lights, gold ornaments, and natural pine. I was so depressed the tree stayed up until the next spring. That summer, Chloe broke some devastating news: she was terminally ill. I was furious at the world. She didn't deserve this. The diagnosis was grim. So grim that Leo proposed earlier than planned, wanting to live in the moment with her. Chloe had always been obsessed with having a huge, dreamy wedding. When we were teenagers, we'd go into bridal shops and try on as many dresses as we could. But with her family estranged and Leo barely out of medical school, drowning in debt, the wedding of her dreams was out of the question. So I made a decision. I told her I would pay for her wedding. It would be a small event, but I'd make sure her dress and the decorations were as perfect as she'd always imagined. I still had the money I'd saved for my own wedding. As financially risky as it seemed, I was sure that making her final days special would be worth more than gold when she was gone. Her illness put my own heartbreak into perspective. I threw myself into planning, feeling hopeful as Chloe seemed to handle her chemo sessions well, looking much better than other patients. Our friends rallied around her, bringing groceries and helping with utility bills since she was out of work. I had offered to help her get a better health insurance plan, given my job at an insurance company, but she declined. This was the first sign, the first thread I could have pulled to unravel her entire web of lies. But at the time, I simply respected her wishes, not wanting to intrude, and focused on giving her the fairy tale wedding she wanted. The plan was set. A beautiful rental dress and tiara. A florist would create an indoor garden inside my apartment, which would be the venue. A 6-tier wedding cake was ordered. We planned for 35 guests, with tables, an aisle, and a musician for soft music. Then, my world tilted on its axis. My first job out of college was as a junior sales executive for a health insurance company, and I was called to court to be a witness in a legal dispute. As I was getting cleared to enter the building, I saw him. Adrian. My stomach churned. My first thought was courtroom wedding. He vanished into an elevator before I could react. But the sight of him messed up my whole day, bringing back the painful lack of closure. I couldn't let it go. I contacted a friend doing her law internship at that court district and asked her to check the records for Adrian. There was no wedding, which was a silly relief. But there was something else, a fraud claim, with Adrian listed as the plaintiff. It was strange. He was far too smart to get scammed. I still wanted to help Chloe with her insurance, even though I knew it was tough for companies to take on terminally ill patients. I begged my old boss to help, but when he searched her name in the system, she wasn't there. This was odd, because she had specifically told me which company she was with. I felt guilty for snooping. A month later, my friend from the courthouse called with disgusting news. The defendant in Adrian's fraud lawsuit was my best friend, Chloe. The case had become popular gossip among the clerks because Adrian had fallen for a complicated Cupid scam. It turned out that Chloe and Adrian had been having an affair for a full year, behind my back and Leo's. This reveals Chloe's greatest fatal flaw, her insatiable greed. She wasn't content with one man's devotion or another's money. She needed both. And that would ultimately seal her fate. And she wasn't out of work, she'd been fired for embezzlement and larceny. Her terminal illness was a complete fabrication. She had scammed Adrian out of nearly $20,000 for fake medical bills, on top of money for a bogus investment. The constant apartment moves I thought were to save money were actually to evade consequences. I avoided her for a week, my mind reeling. I hired a private investigator to dig deeper. The PI confirmed everything. Adrian's name was on the lease for a secret love nest studio apartment 2 hours away. He had been lying about his work hours and had even covered her car payments multiple times. Chloe had him as her sugar daddy. She had watched me cry, held me while I was sick with grief, and then broke the news that my fiancé was seeing someone else, herself. I felt a surge of cold fury. I couldn't imagine the pain of having a fiancé ghost me, and finding out my best friend was the one he was having an affair with. All while she pretended to comfort me. The only word that fits Chloe is a sociopath. Someone incapable of feeling empathy. The disgust and pain hit me hard. But I was also strangely numb. I had invested so much of myself in helping her that I felt empty. I marched straight to every wedding vendor and cancelled everything, getting my money back before it was too late. I defunded her entire wedding. No cake. No dress. No indoor garden. That Friday, I sat Leo down and showed him all the proof. He cried. But then he admitted he felt painfully relieved. He confessed that he'd felt pressured to get married and had noticed many red flags. Like how she always went to her medical appointments alone and got irritated with his questions. He had even secretly had his ex-roommate, a nurse, run her name in the system at the oncologist's office she claimed to go to. There was no record of her. We had been cheated, used, and emotionally destroyed by the same person. It was a profound loss of innocence. Leo and I decided to do what was right. I paid for a video tribute to my loyal friend and sent it to the local news station as a heartwarming story of love and healing. The video purposely featured her and Leo's apartment complex, so anyone looking to serve her with court papers would know exactly where to find her. We then had to wait. It was an agonizing week. Chloe returned from a camping trip, and Leo had to feign happiness while we were both sick with anticipation. The bomb detonated on a Tuesday morning. The news channel enthusiastically ran our story. A collage of photos detailing how she was about to get married after bravely beating cancer. The fallout was immediate. Dozens of people who had been wronged by her came out of the woodwork. It turned out this was her second time faking an illness. My ex, Adrian, even went straight to the news channel for an interview. It was pathetic to watch him pour his heart out on television about how he'd been so in love and she had just used him. When Leo confronted Chloe with everything, she denied it at first, then called it a lapse of bad judgment. She moved out without much drama. She left me a series of voicemails filled with excuses. I picked up the phone only once. In a cold, level voice, I told her that I had pulverized her wedding and that I was the one who told Leo everything. I warned her never to call me again unless she wanted to find out just how far I would go to see her pay for her crimes. Then I hung up and cried. It took a long time for Leo and me to find normality again. I became emotionally shut down for a while. Chloe somehow avoided jail at the time, even after our friends filed petty claims against her. But here's the best part, I took that wedding money and partnered with Leo to open a small medical clinic. It was the best decision I ever made. Over the years, Leo and I became best friends. And our friendship slowly grew into something more. We got married several years ago and now have a happy family. About 7 years ago, Chloe sent me a Facebook message. It started out sweet, but then she accused me of stealing her man and her life. I just blocked her. I also ran into Adrian once, and he apologized profusely. I accepted. telling him it all worked out for the best, as I now had a life with someone who truly deserved me. While Chloe avoided jail back then, her scams eventually caught up with her. She was later prosecuted for crowdfunding a fake cause and stealing from an elderly person. This all happened a long time ago. Before 1997. Today, Chloe has become a running joke between my husband and me. Whenever one of us does something a little crappy, like he eats my ice cream or I forget to get gas, we'll just say, "Really, Chloe?" It's our inside joke for catching someone in a lie. This story is a harsh lesson that the deepest betrayals often come from those we hold closest. But it also shows that your greatest happiness can emerge directly from the ashes of that destruction. So, let me ask you, have you ever had a friendship that turned out to be a complete lie? And how did you find your own version of a happy ending?